Hello. Bim, bam, pow. Here we are. Hey, it's me. It's Will. Hi, I'm back again here talking. So today, a question I wanted to answer, think about, reflect on in front of you is what is stress and how do I manage it? So I think I think about stress a lot, especially since I've had a pretty stressful week. I had an interview. It was a 15-minute interview, and a wasp came in the room 10 minutes in, and I was like right in like a question, and the wasp was buzzing in my face, and it was very distracting. So that was a very stressful situation. I was very stressed. I was very stressed indeed, and for me, stress is when it's like a couple things for me personally. So like there's the environmental stress of like something happening right now. So like in that example I threw down, there's like a fucking wasp in my face, right? There's a wasp there. So I am just trying not to get stung by a wasp. I'm generally cool with wasps as long as they're not immediately in my face. Don't have a problem with them, but I also think the things that kind of modulate how I experience stress is kind of like a lot of my historic data, right? About like what's stressful for me, like something that I've been thinking about a lot this week when I think about stress and how I manage it, and things that kind of like multiply up my experience of stress. It's like a lot of my historic emotional weight and burden that I have in a certain situation. So with interviews, for example, I feel that because of how I felt in exams when I was younger, I really didn't, a little bit of story and background on me. I'm dyslexic. I hated exams. So when I go into school and I have to do exams for school, and sit and do like an exam paper for an hour, I was having a bad time. I was very stressed. Stress for me feels like a lot of tension in the head, tension in the muscles and the body. Like my options are really limited. So in this exam, I think I had like panic attacks. Like I was really worried about my academic performance because I just struggled to perform on exams. So I'd come in, I'd do this exam, I would be really overwhelmed, really stressed, panicking. My mind would go blank and I wouldn't do well on the exams. So it just gave me this idea that for like a long time, just keep away from exams, Will, right? So when I went to university, did my degree in film and TV in Aberystwyth, I picked modules intentionally so I would never have to do exams because I found exams incredibly stressful. I did have a practical exam, and I'll talk about that as an exemption maybe in a little bit. But for me, a lot of the historic stuff, right? So I had this idea that I struggled with exams because I felt like I was dumb. Because I have a learning disability, technically I'm dyslexic. So I would have that in my head, and then I come to these situations again with like time, pressure sensitive, like interviews in my head really linked with exams. I feel like I usually perform quite well in interviews. Like I feel pretty comfortable navigating them when I get in there and I'm talking, but like it's kind of the inertia before, right? The idea of moving from one task to another task, that space in between, that really stresses me, and like the idea of like going and doing that. And I think it also partly comes for me, like what modulates the stress into being higher is my expectations and standards of myself, right? Like I feel like, because I even just said before, I think I'm pretty good in interviews. I think I come in and I have a pretty high expectation for myself of like how I feel it's going to go, how I'm going to answer questions. I think that actually makes me more stressed. So I don't think it helps me a lot. As I may or may not have talked about, the expectations I feel that I put on myself make it way harder to like navigate certain situations. I think a lot of people feel like standards are a good thing, and I think expectations and standards are a good thing, but they do increase stress in my experience of what I've seen of other people, and certainly myself. I don't know if you guys are like me, but like when I think something should be a certain standard, my whole body tenses up and I feel like, man, I need to perform here. I need to do really well. And if I don't do well, like, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of self-judgment. So yeah, like, that's kind of what stress is for me. That's stress looks like. I think it's also when I like can't let go of things, right? There's unresolved things. I always think of this idea of like mental RAM, right? So I was working with a client, and you know, I felt I did something wrong and inappropriate because of a daylight savings change. And like I think they were okay, but like I felt like I did like an injustice, right? So I was like stressed. I had this in my mental RAM. So like I was able to resolve it, but like I couldn't really let go of it, which then like added and stockpiled in my head this additional stress. So when I have things in my head and I'm holding things in my head, that makes it harder to let go of them. It's why you know, I did the journaling video before about journaling. Journaling's great to help me kind of sit with that and process it a bit, but sometimes I have to like actively do things to let them go, right? Like I have to like make amends. And I think this is why something I've really noticed in like, you know, AA, for example, they say go and make amends with people. Go and like release a lot of the stress that can be a trigger for alcohol consumption. So you can kind of let go of it and be at peace a bit more, right? But yeah, I guess a bit more on the how I manage it front. Personally, like talking about it, and like I feel a lot of the stuff I do around stress, right? When there's something I can't let go, like this problem with the client where I feel I made an error and a poor judgment call. Doing stuff like eating right, going for walks, going to the gym, journaling, all that stuff helps, but I find it feels harder and harder to do. So something I've really noticed and found helpful is to kind of try and rip the band-aid off as soon as you physically can with that kind of stuff. And like, it's scary, don't get me wrong. I felt anxious and worried about it, like that, like there's going to be a rejection there. And maybe there's like a deeper part of me that like worries about navigating conflict and stuff. I certainly know there are challenges I have there with conflict sometimes, but managing it through communicating it is a really good place to start. I feel with how I manage it, but also like something I worry about in myself, and this is in my historic experience. So I've had like several suicide attempts when I was younger, right? I think maybe in part because of a lot of the stuff I talked about before, about kind of like feeling dumb, and also I know I have a big relationship challenge with my mom. And I took a lot of responsibility for her emotions. She was in a lot of distress when I was younger. So, you know, I guess a concern for me is to like spiral back down to that place, because I've like known what it's like to be there. I haven't been there in a long time, right? I'm 30 now. Last suicide attempt was 15 years ago. So like, I know I'm not going to do anything, but like, it's valuable, I guess, in my head to be like aware of like the stress, how the stress builds, how the stress accumulates, because if I don't keep an eye on it and I don't keep on top of it, I'm not meditating, I'm not journaling, you know, that is a very realistic road I can kind of walk down eventually. I think it has to get to a really bad place. So I guess this, some of the stakes of like what is stress and how I manage it are pretty high, and I guess this is reflecting here why I think like I put a lot of value and importance on the self-care stuff. You know, going places, intellectual curiosity, emotionally taking care of myself, because like if I don't do this stuff, I'm gonna like get into a really bad headspace fairly quickly. And I think I feel that a lot of people have capacity for this. I don't regret kind of going to the intense levels I have with suicidality. I actually think it's made me a better person. It's helped me grow a lot. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Bad time. But it's helped me kind of actually better understand my extremes of stress, and help me reflect more on like what do I do at those like levels, at those extreme levels, right? Like, how do I ride those waves? And like, I've ridden those waves sometimes, but sometimes it's too much, and sometimes we need help, and that's why I go to therapy, and I've had coaching, life coaching, and I will continue to engage with therapy, even now, just to kind of make sure everything's kind of balanced and everything's in a good place. Because like if you don't take care of yourself, then like everything else becomes harder, right? Everything becomes more stressful, right? If you're holding something in your mental RAM, I certainly feel this, like that challenge with the client, I'm holding that in my mental RAM. The self-care stuff was just harder. So I think sometimes stopping and like figuring out what is stressing you specifically, right? Because I think a projection I had with my week was that like, because I'm behind, I had, I think, an expectation that I should have been doing more, and I think that expectation was that like actually to do more was making amends with this client. I thought it was the interview, and the interview did stress me out a bit, but the real relief came when I resolved the thing with the client. So I think they kind of coupled up together, but I think actually it was the injustice I felt, because I think it goes against my values more of being like accepting and compassionate, to call back to my previous video. So yeah, that's stress. That's how I manage it, and the kind of obstacles I face as a human, figuring out how to be a human. Yeah, like and subscribe, all the good stuff. Thank you for listening to my reflection, and I hope you have a wonderful day.